Hey guys, tonight we're embarking on a unique journey back in time to join the Vikings on their legendary longships. But here's the twist. You're not just observing burly warriors navigate treacherous seas. You're also witnessing one of the most intriguing and unlikely crew members in maritime history: cats. Imagine standing on the deck of a Viking vessel, salt spray stinging your face, wind whipping through your hair, and at your feet, a sleek feline companion calmly grooming itself as if conquering new lands is just another Tuesday. You probably won't survive 5 minutes in the harsh reality of Viking life, between the bone-chilling North Sea winds, the constant threat of raids, and the questionable hygiene standards. But these cats? They not only survived but thrived, forming a unique bond with their Viking companions. So, before we dive deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I love seeing how this little bedtime community spans the globe. Your comments and feedback are what keep this community thriving. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's delve into 9th century Scandinavia, where the unique relationship between Vikings and cats began not with conquest but with necessity. Contrary to popular belief, the Norse people weren't just bloodthirsty raiders. They were sophisticated traders, explorers, and settlers who understood the value of practical partnerships. Few partnerships were more useful than the one they forged with domestic cats. The bond between Vikings and their feline companions runs deeper than most people realize. Archaeological evidence from sites across Scandinavia reveals cat bones alongside human remains, suggesting these weren't just working animals but cherished members of Viking households. Some burial sites have even revealed cats interred with their owners, indicating a belief that these creatures would continue their protective duties in the afterlife. But here's where it gets interesting and slightly controversial among historians. While we know cats were present in Viking society, scholars still argue whether they were primarily kept for practical pest control or if they held more profound spiritual significance. The truth, as you'll discover, is probably both. These weren't your modern pampered house cats lounging in sunbeams. These were hardy, working animals that earned their keep aboard ships and in settlements. The Vikings' appreciation for cats likely stemmed from their connection to Freya, the Norse goddess of love, fertility, and war. According to mythology, Freya's chariot was pulled by 2 magnificent cats named Beigel and Tregegil, though historians still debate whether these names are authentic or modern additions to the stories. What's undisputed is that cats held a special place in Norse cosmology, representing qualities the Vikings admired: independence, cunning, and the ability to thrive in harsh conditions. As you settle into this tale, imagine the practical reality of Viking life. These seafaring people spent months at sea, their wooden ships loaded with precious cargo, food supplies, and trade goods. Rats and mice posed a constant threat, capable of destroying entire shipments and spreading disease among the crew. Enter the ship's cat, a 4-legged solution to a problem that could mean the difference between a profitable voyage and disaster. The Vikings' appreciation for cats wasn't just sentimental, was born out of necessity and a deep understanding of the value these animals brought to their seafaring life. The relationship wasn't one-sided, though. Vikings provided their feline companions with steady meals, warm shelter, and protection from larger predators. In return, cats offered their services as pest controllers, weather predictors, and even spiritual guardians. Some Viking sailors believed cats could sense storms approaching, watching their behavior for signs of changing weather patterns. Consider the logistics of keeping a cat aboard a Viking longship. These vessels, typically 70 to 100 feet long, housed crews of 30 to 60 men during voyages that could last months. Space was at a premium, with every inch carefully allocated for essential supplies, weapons, and trade goods. Yet Vikings consistently made room for cats, suggesting their value went far beyond simple pest control. The cats themselves had to be remarkably adaptable. They needed to maintain their footing on rolling decks, tolerate the constant spray of seawater, and remain calm during raids or storms. Only the hardiest felines survived the rigorous selection process of Viking seafaring life. These weren't delicate creatures, they were maritime athletes, perfectly adapted to life at sea. Archaeological discoveries have revealed fascinating details about these Viking cats. Bone analysis shows they were typically larger and more robust than their land-dwelling cousins, suggesting selective breeding for strength and endurance. Some skeletons show evidence of healed injuries consistent with shipboard life, broken bones that were mended while at sea, indicating that these cats lived their entire lives aboard Viking vessels. The cultural significance of cats in Viking society extended beyond their practical applications. Norse literature contains numerous references to cats as symbols of cunning and independence. The famous prose Edda mentions cats in various contexts, always portraying them as creatures worthy of respect and admiration. The Vikings viewed cats as a reflection of their values: self-reliance, adaptability, and the ability to thrive in harsh environments. Interestingly, the spread of domestic cats throughout Northern Europe can be partially attributed to Viking expansion. As Norse traders and raiders established settlements from Iceland to Constantinople, they brought their feline companions along. Genetic studies of modern European cat populations show distinct lineages that trace back to Scandinavian origins, suggesting Viking cats left a lasting biological legacy across the continent. The daily routine aboard a Viking ship would have been dramatically different with cats present. These animals provided companionship during long, monotonous stretches at sea, offering psychological benefits that modern research has only recently begun to understand. The simple act of petting a cat releases stress-reducing hormones, a biological response that would have been invaluable to warriors facing the uncertainties of Viking life. Perhaps most remarkably, these cats served as living links to home for Vikings far from their native shores. In a world where voyages could last years, and many sailors never returned, a ship's cat represented continuity and comfort. They were reminders of hearth and home, carrying with them the scents and memories of familiar places. You're delving deeper into this ancient world, where the practical and the mystical intertwine like the threads of a complex tapestry. Let's unravel the spiritual core of the Viking cat connection, revolving around one of the captivating figures in Norse mythology, Freya, the goddess who is often associated with cats. Imagine Freya in your mind, not as a fragile maiden, but as a potent deity who embodied both love and war, fertility and death. She was a figure of depth, contradiction, and absolute fascination to the Norse people. Pulling her golden chariot across the heavens were two majestic cats named Beigel and Tregegal. These were not your ordinary barn cats. They were divine beings, large and powerful, with fur described as gray or blue, depending on the source. The names themselves tell a story. Beigel likely means bee gold or honey gold, while Tregegal translates to tree gold or amber, both references to precious substances that glowed like the sun. Some scholars argue that these names might be later additions to the mythology, but what is undisputed is that cats held an extraordinarily high place in Freya's divine hierarchy. Here's where it gets interesting from a historical perspective. These cats were reportedly a gift from Thor himself. Imagine that scene. The thunder god, known for his mighty hammer and booming voice, presenting two kittens to the goddess of love. It's almost comically domestic, yet it speaks to the deep respect Norse culture held for these animals. The fact that Thor, arguably the most popular god among common Vikings, would gift cats to Freya suggests their value transcended mere pest control. But let's pause here and consider what scholars still debate about this relationship. Some historians question whether the cat chariot imagery was original to Norse mythology or influenced by later Christian interpretations trying to make pagan beliefs seem more exotic. The truth, as often happens with ancient mythology, probably lies somewhere in the middle. Cats were crucial to Freya worship. Still, the specific details may have evolved over centuries of storytelling. The practical implications of this divine connection were profound for Viking society. Cats were not just working animals. They were living links to the sacred feminine. Norse brides were traditionally given kittens as wedding gifts, not just for practical reasons, but because these animals were believed to bring Freya's blessings of fertility and prosperity to the marriage. Although some modern historians question the universality of this practice, archaeological evidence supports the special status of cats in Norse domestic life. Consider the psychological impact of this belief system on Viking sailors. When you're facing weeks or months at sea, with storms that could sink your ship and enemies who might kill you, having a creature aboard that's connected to divine protection isn't just comforting. It's essential for morale. These cats weren't just catching mice. They were carrying the blessing of a goddess who could influence both love and war. The archaeological record supports this spiritual significance in fascinating ways. Cats, which can be both male and female, have been found in high-status Viking burials, suggesting that these animals were valued enough to accompany their owners into the afterlife. Some burial sites show cats interred with jewelry and other precious goods, indicating they held a status beyond that of mere pets or working animals. But here's where the story becomes more complex and, frankly, more human. While cats were sacred to Freya, they were also practical necessities. Archaeological evidence from Viking trading centers reveals cut marks on cat bones, suggesting that these animals were sometimes skinned for their fur. This apparent contradiction, revering cats while also using them for practical purposes, reflects the pragmatic spirituality of Viking culture. The sacred and the practical weren't separate categories. They were intertwined aspects of daily survival. This discussion of the valuable and spiritual roles of cats in Viking society provides a comprehensive understanding of their significance and the complexity of Norse spirituality. The size of Viking-era cats tells another intriguing story. Archaeological analysis reveals that domestic cats during the Viking Age were significantly smaller than modern house cats, about 16% smaller on average. This suggests that these weren't pampered pets but relatively hardy, compact animals bred for efficiency and survival in harsh conditions. They needed to be small enough to navigate cramped ship quarters while remaining effective hunters. This preference for smaller, more efficient cats reflects the practical considerations of cat ownership in the Viking era and the cultural values of the time. According to Norse belief, Freya's cats also served as weather predictors. Sailors watched their behavior for signs of approaching storms, believing these divine creatures could sense atmospheric changes before humans. Whether this was superstition or observation of genuine feline sensitivity to barometric pressure, it gave cats another layer of practical value aboard Viking ships. The goddess herself was often depicted in art and jewelry alongside her feline companions. Viking artisans created intricate brooches, pendants, and amulets featuring cats, which served as both decorative items and spiritual talismans. Warriors and travelers wore these pieces, believing they would invoke Freya's protection during dangerous journeys. Interestingly, the connection between Freya and cats may have influenced how Vikings viewed feline behavior. Cats' independence, their ability to survive in harsh conditions, and their fierce protection of their territory all mirrored qualities the Norse admired in themselves. In a culture that valued self-reliance and strength, cats embodied ideal characteristics. The spread of this cat goddess worship followed Viking expansion routes. As Norse traders and raiders established settlements from Iceland to Constantinople, they brought both their cats and their beliefs about Freya's divine felines. Genetic studies of modern European cat populations show distinct lineages that can be traced back to Scandinavian origins, suggesting Viking cats left both biological and cultural legacies across the continent. This spread of cat goddess worship along Viking expansion routes not only highlights the cultural influence of the Vikings, but also the enduring legacy of their beliefs, which continue to shape our understanding of Norse mythology and cultural history. Perhaps most remarkably, the relationship between Freya and her cats represented something deeper about Norse spirituality. The belief that the divine could be found in the everyday. That a goddess of love and war would choose cats as her companion speaks to a worldview where the sacred permeated ordinary life. For Vikings facing the uncertainties of seafaring existence, This wasn't just mythology. It was a source of comfort, protection, and meaning in an often harsh and unpredictable world. You're settling into the rhythm now, feeling the gentle sway of that imaginary longship beneath your feet. Let's turn our attention to the most crucial job these cats performed: the relentless, never-ending battle against the tiny invaders that could doom an entire voyage: rats and mice. Picture the hold of a Viking ship, cramped and dark, filled with precious cargo. Sacks of grain, dried fish, wheels of cheese, barrels of ale. Everything needed to sustain a crew for weeks or months at sea. Now imagine what happens when rats discover this floating feast. They don't just eat. They contaminate, they multiply, and they can turn a successful trading expedition into a disaster faster than you can say, Odin's ravens. This is where our feline heroes truly earned their keep. Archaeological evidence from Viking-era sites reveals the severity of this pest problem. Cut marks on grain storage containers, gnawed wooden ship components, and the remains of rodent nests in excavated vessels all tell the same story. Without effective pest control, Viking maritime ventures would have been impossible. But here's what makes Viking cats particularly fascinating from a historical perspective. They weren't just any cats. These were specifically bred and selected for shipboard life. Recent studies of Viking-era cat remains have shown that these animals were significantly smaller than modern house cats, with an average size reduction of about 16%. This wasn't a sign of poor nutrition. It was a result of selective breeding for efficiency. Smaller cats required less food, could navigate tight ship spaces more easily, and were still perfectly capable of catching rats and mice. The size difference tells us something profound about Viking priorities. These weren't pampered pets, but working animals bred for specific conditions. Archaeological analysis of cat bones from Viking trading centers reveals fascinating details about their lives. Many show signs of hard living: healed fractures, worn teeth, and other indicators of a rough maritime existence. Yet they also show evidence of care. Healed injuries suggest that the Vikings valued these cats enough to tend to their wounds rather than replace them. Some scholars debate whether Vikings truly understood the full scope of disease prevention their cats provided. While they certainly knew cats caught rats, the connection between rodent control and preventing plague or other diseases might not have been fully understood. However, practical experience would have taught them that ships with cats had fewer problems with spoiled food and contaminated supplies. The hunting techniques of these Viking cats were quite different from those of modern house cats. Ship cats needed to be aggressive, territorial, and fearless. Archaeological evidence suggests they were often kept partially feral, fed enough to keep them loyal to the ship but hungry sufficient to maintain their hunting instincts. This balance required careful management by the crew. Interestingly, genetic studies of modern Scandinavian cat breeds reveal traits that can be traced back to these Viking-era working cats. The Norwegian forest cat, for instance, exhibits genetic markers consistent with cats that lived harsh outdoor lives and developed thick coats to survive in cold climates. These cats' descendants still display the independence and hunting prowess that made their ancestors so valuable aboard longships. The daily routine of a ship's cat would have been both monotonous and crucial. During calm weather, they'd patrol the hold, investigating every sound and scent. When storms hit, they'd need to find secure hiding spots while remaining alert for rodent activity. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks shows that cats often had designated sleeping areas near the warmest parts of the ship, usually close to the cooking fires or in the stern, where the captain's quarters provided some shelter. But the relationship between Vikings and their ship cats wasn't purely utilitarian. Burial evidence suggests these animals formed genuine bonds with their human companions. High-status Viking burials sometimes include cat remains, indicating these animals were valued enough to accompany their owners into the afterlife. This practice suggests that successful ship cats became beloved crew members, not just working animals. The economics of ship cats were also significant. A good Mauser could save a trading expedition thousands of silver pieces worth of cargo. Vikings calculated the cost of feeding a cat against the value of the grain it protected, and the math favored the cats. Trade records from Viking-era markets indicate that ships known to carry effective cats could command higher prices for their cargo, as buyers were aware that the goods were less likely to be contaminated. Training ship cats required specialized knowledge passed down through generations of seafarers. Young cats needed to be socialized to ship life gradually, first on docked vessels, then on short coastal trips before being trusted on long ocean voyages. The most successful ship cats were often the offspring of proven maritime mousers, creating informal breeding programs focused on producing effective working animals. The territorial behavior of cats made them particularly suited to ship life. Once a cat claimed a vessel as its territory, it would defend that space aggressively against any rodent intrusion. This territorial instinct meant that established ship cats were incredibly valuable. They knew every hiding spot, every potential entry point, and every route rats might use to access stored food. Archaeological evidence also reveals the darker side of this relationship. Cat bones from Viking trading centers exhibit cut marks, indicating that these animals were sometimes skinned for their fur. When cats became too old or sick to hunt effectively, or when their pelts became valuable trade goods, practical Vikings would harvest their fur for clothing or as a means of trade. This practice, while seemingly harsh by modern standards, reflects the pragmatic approach Vikings took to all their resources. The success of Viking cats in pest control was so renowned that other maritime cultures began adopting similar practices. Genetic studies show that Viking cats spread throughout Europe and beyond, carried by traders who recognized their value. These cats became the ancestors of many modern European cat populations, their genes carrying the legacy of countless successful voyages. Perhaps most remarkably, the effectiveness of these feline pest controllers helped enable the entire Viking expansion. Without reliable food preservation during long voyages, the exploration of Iceland, Greenland, and even North America would have been impossible. Cats were essential partners in one of history's most extraordinary maritime adventures, as their hunting skills helped fuel the Viking Age itself. You're drifting deeper into this ancient world now, where the creaking of wooden planks and the splash of oars create a rhythmic lullaby. Let's follow one of these remarkable feline sailors through a typical day aboard a Viking longship, experiencing the maritime life that shaped both cats and their human companions. Dawn breaks slowly over the North Sea, and our ship's cat, let's call her Mjolnir, after Thor's hammer, a powerful and revered symbol in Viking mythology, stretches in her favorite sleeping spot near the stern. She's claimed a small space between coiled ropes and leather provisions, where the ship's movement is gentlest, and the wooden hull provides some protection from spray. Archaeological evidence from Viking shipwrecks reveals that cats often establish territories in these more sheltered areas, leaving behind worn patches in the wood where generations of felines made their beds. Mjolnir's first task is her morning patrol. She moves with practiced ease across the narrow deck, her claws finding purchase on the wet planks. The ship is perhaps 60 feet long but only 16 feet wide, cramped quarters for 30 warriors, their gear and precious cargo. Every inch of space matters, and cats learn to navigate this three-dimensional puzzle of ropes, oars, shields, and sleeping men with remarkable agility. The hold is where her real work begins. Here, in the dim space below deck, sacks of grain and barrels of preserved fish create a maze of potential hiding spots for rodents. Recent archaeological analysis of Viking-era storage containers reveals extensive gnaw marks, a testament to the constant battle between ship stores and hungry pests. Mjolnir's keen hearing picks up the faint scratching that means trouble. Mice have found their way into the barley meant to sustain the crew for weeks. But here's where Viking cats differed significantly from their modern descendants. These weren't pampered house cats. They were working animals bred for efficiency and toughness. Studies of Viking-era cat remains indicate that these animals were approximately 16% smaller than modern cats, with a more robust bone structure and evidence of a hard life. Their smaller size wasn't a disadvantage. It allowed them to squeeze into tight spaces where larger cats couldn't follow fleeing rodents. Their adaptability in such challenging conditions is truly impressive. The hunting technique of a ship's cat required adaptation to maritime conditions. On land, cats rely on stealth and patience, waiting motionless for prey. Aboard a constantly moving ship, they developed different strategies. Archaeological evidence suggests these cats became more aggressive hunters, using the ship's motion to their advantage and learning to anticipate how rolling waves would affect their prey's movement patterns. Mjolnir's relationship with the crew reflects the complex social dynamics aboard Viking ships. She's not exactly a pet. Vikings had a practical view of animals, but she's not just livestock either. The men understand her value and treat her accordingly. When the ship's cook prepares the morning meal, he saves scraps of fish for her, but not enough to make her lazy. The ship's cats needed to remain hungry enough to hunt while being fed enough to stay loyal to the vessel. The weather presents constant challenges for maritime cats. When storms hit, Mjolnir must find secure shelter while remaining alert for increased rodent activity. Rough seas often drive rats and mice from their usual hiding places, creating both opportunities and dangers for hunting cats. Archaeological evidence from shipwrecks shows that cats developed remarkable abilities to predict weather changes, often seeking shelter before storms that human sailors hadn't yet detected. This could be due to their acute senses, such as hearing and sensitivity to changes in air pressure. Midday brings different responsibilities. As the sun climbs higher, Mjolnir conducts her territorial rounds, marking key areas of the ship with her scent. This isn't just feline behavior, it's practical pest control. Rodents avoid areas that smell strongly of predators, so a well-marked ship experiences fewer infestations. Viking sailors understood this instinctively, appreciating the cat's role in maintaining the ship's hygiene. The social hierarchy aboard the ship is reflected in subtle ways through Mjolnir. She's learned which crew members are friendly and which are best avoided. Archaeological evidence from Viking burial sites suggests that successful ship's cats often formed strong bonds with specific crew members, sometimes even being buried alongside their human companions. This wasn't sentimentality. It was recognition of genuine partnership in the dangerous business of seafaring. The afternoon brings maintenance duties that affect our feline sailor. When the crew repairs sails or adjusts rigging, Mjolnir must navigate around their work while continuing her pest control duties. The constant activity aboard a Viking ship meant cats needed to be incredibly adaptable, learning to hunt and patrol around human activities that could change the ship's layout hourly. The diet of a ship's cat tells its own story about Viking maritime life. Analysis of Viking-era cat remains reveals a diet rich in fish and marine proteins, quite distinct from that of land-based cats. These cats adapted to eating what the sea provided, developing stronger digestive systems and other nutritional needs than their terrestrial cousins. Some evidence suggests they even learned to catch fish directly from the water during calm weather. Evening brings perhaps the most critical part of Mjolnir's day, the final security sweep. As the crew settles in for the night, she conducts a thorough patrol of the entire vessel. This is when rodents are most active, and a single mist mouse could multiply into a severe infestation. The responsibility weighs heavily on her small shoulders. The survival of the entire expedition might depend on her vigilance. The sleeping arrangements reveal the practical nature of the human-cat relationship aboard Viking ships. Mjolnir doesn't sleep with the crew. She maintains her post near the provisions. But on freezing nights, some evidence suggests cats were allowed closer to the crew's sleeping areas, their body heat providing mutual warmth in the harsh North Atlantic climate. Night watches present unique challenges for ship's cats. While human sentries watch for external threats, cats monitor internal ones. The darkness that hampers human vision aids feline hunters, but the constant motion of the ship requires adaptations that land cats never develop. Archaeological evidence suggests Viking-era cats had enhanced balance and spatial awareness compared to their modern descendants. The relationship between Mjolnir and the ship itself becomes almost mystical over time. Experienced ship's cats learned every creak and groan of their vessel, understanding which sounds meant regular sailing and which indicated potential problems. Some Viking sailors believed their cats could predict not just the weather but also mechanical failures, though this was likely due to the cat's superior hearing and sensitivity to vibration. Perhaps most remarkably, the daily routine of these maritime cats helped enable the entire Viking expansion across the North Atlantic. Without effective pest control during long voyages, expeditions to Iceland, Greenland, and North America would have been impossible. In following Mjolnir through her daily routine, we see how the smallest crew members played essential roles in some of history's most extraordinary maritime adventures. As we delve deeper into this ancient maritime world, we encounter a fascinating blend of practical necessity and spiritual belief. Let's unravel the unique role of these feline companions, who not only served as pest controllers but also as mystical protectors against both visible and unseen forces. Picture yourself on that Viking longship again, but this time, focus on the subtle ways the crew interacts with their feline guardian. You notice how they never step over a sleeping cat, how they murmur quiet words when the cat crosses their path, how they save the choicest fish scraps not just for sustenance but as offerings. These aren't mere superstitions. They're expressions of a deep belief system that viewed cats as bridges between the mortal world and the realm of the gods. The protective role of cats aboard Viking ships extended far beyond catching mice and rats. Archaeological evidence from Viking burial sites reveals that cats were often interred with protective amulets and jewelry, suggesting that they were believed to guard not just physical provisions but also spiritual well-being. A recent analysis of grave goods from Viking-era sites shows that cats buried with their human companions frequently wore small silver pendants or bronze rings, items that would have been valuable enough to indicate the animal's special status. This spiritual protection manifested in several fascinating ways. Viking sailors believed that cats could sense approaching storms before any human could detect the signs. Modern meteorologists might explain this as sensitivity to barometric pressure changes, but to Viking crews, it was proof of their cats' supernatural awareness. Ship's logs from later periods, when Vikings had adopted writing more extensively, contain references to cats behaving strangely before significant weather events, with crews taking these warnings seriously enough to alter course or seek shelter. The connection between cats and weather prediction runs deeper than simple observation. Norse mythology speaks of cats as creatures capable of seeing into the future, a belief that made ship cats invaluable for navigation and voyage planning. Some scholars debate whether this belief system developed from the practical observation of feline behavior or whether it stemmed from deeper mythological traditions. Still, archaeological evidence suggests that both influences were at work. Archaeological analysis of Viking trading centers reveals another dimension of cats' protective role. They were believed to guard against theft and treachery. Merchant ships carrying valuable cargo often had multiple cats, not just for pest control but as spiritual sentinels. The presence of cat imagery on Viking trade goods, carved into wooden chests, etched into metal containers, and woven into textiles, suggests that cats were seen as symbols of security and trustworthiness in commercial dealings. The protective power of cats extended to their ability to ward off evil spirits and malevolent magic. Viking sagas contain numerous references to cats detecting the presence of harmful supernatural forces, from malicious spirits to curses cast by enemies. While modern readers might dismiss these as folklore, archaeological evidence suggests that the Vikings took these beliefs seriously enough to modify their ship construction to accommodate cats' spiritual needs. Some Viking vessels show evidence of small shrines or dedicated spaces where cats could retreat during times of perceived supernatural danger. The relationship between cats and Viking warriors reveals another layer of spiritual protection. Many Viking burial sites contain evidence that victorious warriors were often buried with their cats, suggesting these animals were believed to be protected in the afterlife. Analysis of these burials shows that the cats were typically positioned near the warriors' weapons, implying they were expected to guard their human companions' martial prowess even in death. But cats' protective role wasn't limited to individual ships or warriors. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements shows that cats were considered guardians of entire communities. Excavations of Viking trading posts reveal that cats were often buried at the corners of important buildings, or near community gathering spaces, positioned to ward off threats to the settlement's collective well-being. The breeding and selection of protective cats required specialized knowledge passed down through generations of Viking families. Archaeological analysis of cat remains from different periods reveals that Vikings gradually developed distinct lineages of cats with enhanced protective qualities. Animals that were not only better hunters but also more sensitive to supernatural threats. This selective breeding program suggests that the spiritual aspects of cat ownership were taken as seriously as the practical benefits. The economic value of protective cats created an interesting dynamic in Viking society. Ships known to carry particularly effective guardian cats could command higher prices for passage and cargo transport, as merchants and travelers believed these vessels were less likely to encounter supernatural misfortune. Trade records from Viking-era markets show premium prices paid for cats with proven protective abilities, creating a specialized market for spiritually gifted felines. This economic value not only elevated the status of cats in Viking society but also influenced maritime trade and travel. The training of protective cats was not a simple task but a complex blend of practical animal husbandry and spiritual preparation. Young cats destined for ship duty underwent elaborate ceremonies designed to enhance their supernatural awareness, including exposure to sacred symbols, blessing by religious leaders, and gradual introduction to the spiritual challenges they would face at sea. This evidence suggests a sophisticated understanding of how to prepare cats for their protective roles, a tradition that deserves our respect and appreciation. The relationship between protective cats and Viking navigation reveals fascinating insights into medieval maritime practices. Cats were believed to be able to sense the presence of land before it became visible, leading to navigation techniques that incorporated feline behavior into route planning. Some evidence suggests that experienced navigators would observe their cats' behavior patterns to determine the safest course through dangerous waters or to locate suitable landing sites. The decline of cats' protective role in later Viking society reflects broader changes in Norse religious and cultural practices. As Christianity gradually replaced traditional Norse beliefs, the spiritual significance of cats diminished, though their practical value remained. Archaeological evidence from late Viking-era sites indicates a shift from fewer cats being buried with protective amulets and a greater emphasis on their utilitarian functions, marking a transition from spiritual guardians to working animals. This transition was not abrupt but gradual, reflecting the complex interplay between spiritual beliefs and practical needs in Viking society. Perhaps most remarkably, the protective traditions surrounding Viking cats had a lasting influence on maritime practices throughout Northern Europe for centuries after the Viking Age ended. The belief that cats could guard against supernatural threats at sea persisted in sailor folklore well into the modern era, creating a continuous tradition that linked medieval Norse spirituality with later maritime culture. The legacy of cats as protective guardians aboard Viking ships reminds us that these ancient seafarers understood the ocean as more than just a physical challenge. It was a realm where spiritual forces could determine the difference between successful voyages and catastrophic failure. In recognizing cats as bridges between the material and spiritual worlds, the Vikings created a maritime tradition that honored both a practical necessity and mystical wisdom. Let's delve into the broader currents of history, where individual ships become part of vast migrations that reshaped the world. In this context, we'll follow the remarkable feline voyagers, integral to their Viking companions in establishing new settlements across the known world and beyond. These cats, more than just passengers, were colonists in their own right, carrying within their genes the story of one of history's most successful biological expansions. Picture the moment when a Viking longship beaches on an unfamiliar shore, perhaps the rocky coast of Iceland, the green hills of Ireland, or the mysterious forests of what would become Russia. Among the warriors, traders, and settlers stepping onto new land, small feline forms leap gracefully from the vessel, their keen eyes already surveying this fresh territory. These cats weren't just passengers. They were colonists in their own right, carrying within their genes the story of one of history's most successful biological expansions. Recent genetic studies have revolutionized our understanding of how cats spread across Europe, revealing that Vikings played a pivotal role in what researchers now refer to as the second wave of feline expansion. DNA analysis of cat remains from archaeological sites dating from 15,000 to 2,700 years ago shows that cats expanded geographically in two distinct waves. The first wave saw cats move from the Middle East to the Eastern Mediterranean alongside early farmers. However, the second wave, beginning around 1700 BC and accelerating during the Viking Age, ushered cats much further across Europe and beyond, a journey that the Vikings significantly influenced. The evidence for Viking involvement in cat distribution is concrete. Researchers have found that DNA from an Egyptian cat matches that of a feline discovered at a German archaeological site, suggesting these animals traveled vast distances aboard trading vessels. But the most compelling evidence comes from the genetic signatures of cats found at Viking settlements across Scandinavia, Britain, and the North Atlantic islands, which show clear lineages traceable to shipborne populations. Archaeological evidence from Viking trading centers reveals the systematic nature of feline colonization. Excavations at sites such as Hedeby in Denmark and Birka in Sweden reveal that cats were introduced to these settlements shortly after their establishment, indicating they were deliberately introduced rather than arriving by chance. The frequency of cats remaining at these sites suggests that bringing cats to new settlements was a standard practice rather than an occasional occurrence, highlighting the strategic planning and foresight of the Vikings. The practical reasons for this feline expansion were compelling. New settlements faced immediate challenges from rodent populations that could devastate stored food supplies before communities became self-sufficient. Archaeological analysis of early Viking settlements reveals evidence of significant rodent damage to grain stores and other provisions, underscoring the importance of effective pest control for survival. Cats provided an immediate solution that didn't require local resources or specialized knowledge to maintain. However, the expansion of cats through Viking networks involved more than simple transportation. Archaeological evidence suggests that Vikings developed sophisticated breeding programs designed to produce cats suited for different environments and purposes. Cats destined for harsh northern climates were bred for thick coats and robust builds, while those intended for trading missions were selected for smaller size and adaptability to shipboard life. The Norwegian forest cat is a notable example of Viking-era cat breeding. Archaeological evidence suggests this breed developed specifically to meet the needs of Norse settlers in harsh northern environments. These cats possessed thick, water-resistant coats that allowed them to survive Scandinavian winters, combined with the hunting skills necessary to control pests in isolated settlements. Their genetic legacy can be traced through Viking expansion routes, appearing in modified forms wherever Norse settlers established permanent communities. The role of cats in Viking trade networks reveals another dimension of their expansion across Europe. Trading posts and market towns served as distribution centers where cats from different regions were exchanged, bred, and redistributed. Archaeological evidence from these sites shows cat populations with diverse genetic backgrounds, suggesting active breeding programs designed to combine desirable traits from different lineages. The expansion of cats through Viking networks also facilitated cultural exchange in unexpected ways. Different cat breeds carried with them the folklore and beliefs of their regions of origin, creating hybrid mythologies as Viking settlements incorporated local traditions. Archaeological evidence suggests that cat-related religious practices varied significantly between different Viking settlements, reflecting the diverse cultural influences these animals brought with them and adding to the richness and diversity of Viking settlements. The economic impact of cat distribution through Viking networks was substantial. Successful settlements with effective pest control could support larger populations and more extensive trade networks, creating positive feedback loops that encouraged further expansion. Archaeological analysis of Viking-era settlements reveals a correlation between the presence of cat remains and evidence of long-term occupation, suggesting that these animals played a crucial role in the success of the colonies. The genetic legacy of Viking cat distribution extends far beyond the medieval period. Modern DNA analysis reveals that many European cat populations still carry genetic markers traceable to Viking-era expansions. These genetic signatures offer researchers powerful tools for tracing Viking settlement patterns and trade routes, creating a biological map of Norse expansion that complements archaeological and historical evidence. The adaptation of cats to new environments during Viking expansion demonstrates remarkable evolutionary flexibility. Archaeological evidence indicates that cats introduced to different regions quickly developed characteristics adapted to local conditions. Island populations became smaller and more efficient hunters, while cats in the forested areas developed enhanced climbing abilities and different hunting strategies. The social dynamics of cat integration into new settlements reveal fascinating insights into Viking colonial practices. Archaeological evidence suggests that cats were often among the first animals introduced to new settlements, preceding even livestock in some cases. This prioritization indicates that Vikings understood the fundamental importance of pest control in establishing successful colonies. The decline of Viking expansion in the later medieval period coincided with changes in cat distribution patterns across Europe. As Viking trading networks gave way to other commercial systems, the systematic spread of cats through Norse channels diminished. However, the genetic and cultural legacy of this expansion continued to influence European cat populations for centuries. Perhaps most remarkably, the Viking expansion of cats created the foundation for modern European feline diversity. The genetic mixing that occurred as cats from different regions encountered each other in Viking settlements and trading posts produced the varied cat populations that characterize Europe today. In following these small voyagers across the medieval world, we see how the ambitions of human explorers created opportunities for other species to expand their territories and influence. The story of cats spreading across Europe through Viking networks reminds us that historical expansion involved entire ecosystems, not just human populations. These feline colonists were active participants in one of history's great migrations, carrying their genetic heritage while adapting to new challenges and opportunities in ways that continue to shape the world today. You're now entering the intimate heart of Viking society, where the bonds between humans and cats extend far beyond practical necessity into the sacred realm of family life and social tradition. Let's explore how these remarkable felines became woven into the very fabric of Norse customs, particularly in the most important ceremonies that marked the transitions of life. Picture a Viking wedding ceremony taking place in a great hall with carved wooden pillars reaching toward the smoke-darkened rafters. Among the traditional gifts presented to the new bride, silver arm rings, fine textiles, household tools. You notice something unexpected. A small, alert kitten nestled in a beautifully woven basket. This isn't merely a charming addition to the festivities. It's a profound expression of Viking beliefs about love, fertility, and the divine blessing of Freya herself. The practice of giving cats as wedding gifts unveils the profound spiritual significance these animals held in Viking society. Archaeological evidence from Viking-era settlements reveals that cats were among the most cherished wedding presents, often mentioned in marriage contracts and dowry lists alongside precious metals and land holdings. This tradition wasn't merely about providing practical pest control for the new household. It was a spiritual investment in the couple's future happiness and prosperity. The connection between cats and marriage stemmed directly from their association with Freya, the goddess who presided over love, fertility, and domestic harmony in Viking culture. Vikings believed that cats carried Freya's blessing into new households, ensuring that marriages would be fruitful and filled with affection. Men specifically sought wives who demonstrated kindness toward cats, viewing this as an indicator of their capacity for nurturing and their likelihood of receiving divine favor. Archaeological analysis of Viking wedding sites reveals fascinating details about how cats were integrated into marriage ceremonies. Excavations of ceremonial halls show evidence of special spaces prepared for cats during wedding festivities, including small feeding areas and comfortable resting spots decorated with symbols of Freya. These arrangements suggest that cats weren't merely gifts to be presented and forgotten, but active participants in the sacred rituals that bound couples together. The selection of wedding cats involved careful consideration of specific qualities believed to enhance marital success. Young female cats were particularly prized, as they symbolized fertility and the potential for the marriage to produce healthy children. Cats with unusual markings or colors were considered especially auspicious, believed to carry enhanced spiritual power that would protect the new household from misfortune. The economic value of cats as wedding gifts created interesting dynamics within Viking society. Families with reputations for breeding exceptional cats could command significant bride prices, as these animals were seen as investments in the couple's future prosperity. Trade records from Viking markets indicate that cats intended as wedding gifts often sold for prices comparable to those of valuable jewelry or fine weapons. The training and preparation of wedding cats involved specialized rituals designed to enhance their protective and blessing-giving qualities. These cats underwent ceremonies that included exposure to sacred symbols, blessings by religious practitioners, and a gradual introduction to the household duties they would perform in their new homes. Archaeological evidence suggests that wedding cats were often given special names, invoking Freya's protection and favor. The role of cats in Viking marriage extended beyond the wedding ceremony itself into the ongoing life of the household. These animals were believed to serve as guardians of marital harmony, with their behavior interpreted as indicators of the relationship's health. A content, well-fed cat was seen as evidence of a successful marriage. In contrast, a restless or unhappy cat may signal underlying problems that require attention, underscoring the symbolic significance of their presence. The symbolic significance of cats in Viking marriages had a profound influence on broader social customs surrounding courtship and family formation. Young men would often demonstrate their worthiness as husbands by showing skill in caring for cats. At the same time, women who displayed a particular affinity for felines were considered especially desirable as wives. This created a cultural feedback loop that elevated the status of cats throughout Viking society. Archaeological evidence from Viking burial sites reveals that married couples were often interred with their wedding cats, suggesting these animals maintained their spiritual significance throughout the couple's lifetime. Analysis of these burials shows that cats were typically positioned between the husband and wife, symbolically maintaining their role as guardians of marital harmony even in death. The decline of cat-centered marriage customs in later Viking society reflects broader changes in Norse religious practices and social organization. As Christianity gradually replaced traditional Norse beliefs, the spiritual significance of cats in marriage ceremonies diminished, though some customs persisted in modified forms well into the medieval period. Archaeological evidence from late Viking-era sites indicates a decrease in cats in wedding-related contexts, and a greater emphasis on Christian symbols and practices. The influence of Viking cat marriage customs extended beyond Scandinavia through trade networks and cultural exchange. Evidence suggests that Norse settlers carried these traditions to their new homes in Iceland, Ireland, and other territories, where they influenced local customs around marriage and domestic animals. Some scholars argue that certain European folk traditions involving cats and weddings can be traced back to the influence of Viking culture. The economic impact of cat-centered marriage customs led to the development of specialized breeding programs designed to produce animals suitable for wedding gifts. Archaeological analysis of Viking settlements shows evidence of dedicated cat breeding facilities, complete with specialized housing and feeding arrangements designed to make healthy, attractive animals for the marriage market. These operations required significant investment and expertise, indicating the high value placed on quality wedding cats. The social dynamics surrounding cat wedding gifts reveal fascinating insights into Viking concepts of gender roles and family formation. While men typically purchased or provided the cats, women were expected to demonstrate their worthiness through their treatment of these animals. This created a system where both partners had specific responsibilities related to the feline members of their household, reinforcing concepts of shared domestic duty and mutual care. The legacy of Viking cat marriage customs influenced Scandinavian folk traditions for centuries after the Viking Age came to an end. Many traditional wedding practices in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden retained elements of cat symbolism and blessing, creating continuity between ancient Norse beliefs and later cultural expressions. Modern Scandinavian folklore still contains references to cats as bringers of marital luck and domestic harmony, echoing the beliefs of their Viking ancestors. Perhaps most remarkably, the Viking tradition of associating cats with successful marriages created a cultural template that influenced European attitudes toward domestic animals for generations. The idea that pets could serve as indicators and guardians of family harmony became deeply embedded in Northern European culture, creating traditions that persist in modified forms today. In recognizing cats as essential partners in the most sacred human relationships, Vikings established a model of human-animal cooperation that transcended mere utility to embrace genuine spiritual partnership. You're now venturing into the mystical realm where Viking pragmatism merged with supernatural belief, where the behavior of cats was read like ancient runes to divine the future. Let's explore how these remarkable felines served not just as companions and workers, but as living oracles whose every movement held significance for the Norse people who shared their world. Imagine yourself on a Viking longship with storm clouds looming. The crew, dependent on accurate weather forecasts for their survival, watches the ship's cat closely. Its unusual behavior, pacing, grooming with intensity, or positioning itself in specific spots is not mere feline antics. To the Vikings, these actions were crucial indicators, determining whether they could continue their voyage or seek shelter. This practical aspect of cat weather prediction was a matter of life and death for the seafaring community. The association between cats and weather prediction originated from centuries of careful observation by seafaring peoples who relied on accurate forecasting for their survival. Vikings observed that cats exhibited consistent behavioral patterns before significant weather changes, prompting them to develop sophisticated systems for interpreting feline omens. Archaeological evidence from coastal Viking settlements reveals specialized areas where cats were observed for weather prediction, accompanied by detailed records of their behavioral patterns and the corresponding meteorological outcomes. Vikings didn't understand the scientific basis for cats' weather-sensing abilities, but their observations were remarkably accurate. Modern research has confirmed that cats can detect changes in barometric pressure, humidity, and electromagnetic fields that precede weather systems, validating the Viking belief in their predictive powers. The sensitivity of cats to these environmental changes made them invaluable early warning systems for communities dependent on maritime activities and agricultural timing. Viking weather lore involving cats was remarkably detailed and specific. A cat washing behind its ears was believed to predict rain within hours, while a cat sleeping with its back to the fire indicated an approaching storm. Cats that refused to go outside were seen as warning of severe weather, while those that ventured out confidently suggested fair conditions would continue. These observations were passed down through generations and became integral parts of Viking maritime knowledge. The role of cats in predicting seasonal changes was vital for agricultural communities. Vikings observed that cats' behavior patterns shifted before major seasonal transitions, enabling farmers to time planting, harvesting, and livestock management activities accordingly. The practical application of cat weather prediction, as evidenced by archaeological findings from Viking farms, enabled the creation of comprehensive forecasting systems that informed crucial agricultural decisions. The spiritual dimension of cat weather prediction was a significant aspect of Viking culture. Cats were believed to be connected to divine forces, particularly Freya, who controlled many aspects of fertility and natural cycles. This divine connection elevated weather prediction from mere observation to a sacred practice, with cats serving as intermediaries between human communities and the forces that controlled their environment. Understanding this belief system can provide a deeper connection to the cultural practices of the Viking era. The economic impact of cat weather prediction was significant for Viking communities. Accurate forecasting could mean the difference between successful trading voyages and devastating losses. This made cats, with their reputations for accurate weather prediction, valuable economic assets beyond their pest control abilities. Trade records from Viking markets indicate that these cats commanded premium prices, leading to specialized breeding programs aimed at enhancing their forecasting abilities. The training and care of weather-predicting cats involved specific rituals and practices designed to enhance their sensitivity to weather patterns. These cats were fed special diets believed to sharpen their senses, housed in locations that maximize their exposure to environmental changes, and observed by specialists who recorded their behavioral patterns. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Viking settlements maintained dedicated weather-watching stations where cats were explicitly kept for forecasting purposes. The integration of cat weather prediction with other Viking forecasting methods created comprehensive systems for environmental monitoring. Cats' behavioral observations were combined with astronomical observations, wind patterns, and other natural indicators to create detailed weather forecasts. This systematic approach to environmental prediction demonstrates the sophisticated understanding Vikings had of natural systems and their interconnections. The social status of weather-predicting cats elevated them above ordinary working animals in Viking society. These cats were often given names reflecting their special abilities and were treated with particular reverence by their communities. Archaeological evidence from Viking burial sites shows that some weather-predicting cats were interred with special honors, indicating their valued status in Norse society. The decline of cat weather prediction in later Viking society reflects broader changes in Norse culture and technology. As more sophisticated weather forecasting methods developed and Christian beliefs replaced traditional Norse practices, the spiritual significance of cat behavior diminished. However, many practical observations about cat behavior and weather patterns persisted in Scandinavian folk knowledge well into the modern era. The accuracy of Viking cat weather prediction has been validated by modern meteorological research. Studies of animal behavior and weather patterns confirm that cats do exhibit consistent behavioral changes before significant weather events, lending credibility to Viking forecasting methods. This validation suggests that Viking weather lore represented genuine scientific observation disguised as supernatural belief. The influence of Viking cat weather prediction extended beyond Scandinavia through trade networks and cultural exchange. Norse settlers carried these practices to their new homes in Iceland, Greenland, and other territories, where they adapted local cat populations for weather forecasting. Evidence suggests that some European folk traditions involving cats and weather can be traced back to the influence of Viking culture. The psychological impact of cat weather prediction on Viking communities was profound. Having reliable forecasting methods reduced anxiety about weather-related risks and allowed communities to plan activities with greater confidence. This psychological benefit may have been as significant as the practical advantages of accurate weather prediction, providing comfort and confidence in uncertain environments. The legacy of Viking cat weather prediction influenced Scandinavian maritime traditions for centuries after the Viking Age came to an end. Many traditional sailing practices in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden retained elements of animal-based weather forecasting, creating continuity between ancient Norse knowledge and later maritime culture. Modern Scandinavian folklore still contains references to cats as weather predictors, echoing the beliefs of their Viking ancestors. Perhaps most remarkably, the Viking tradition of observing cats for weather prediction represents an early example of systematic environmental monitoring. By carefully recording animal behavior and correlating it with weather patterns, Vikings developed empirical methods for understanding natural systems that prefigured modern scientific approaches. In recognizing cats as sensitive indicators of environmental change, Vikings established a model of human-animal cooperation in environmental monitoring that demonstrates the practical value of traditional ecological knowledge. The sophistication of Viking cat weather prediction challenges modern assumptions about medieval scientific understanding. Rather than representing primitive superstition, these practices demonstrate careful observation, systematic record-keeping, and empirical validation that rivals modern forecasting methods in some respects. The integration of animal behavior with other environmental indicators created forecasting systems that were both scientifically sound and culturally meaningful. Welcome to the intricate world of Viking commerce, where the value of cats transcended their roles as ship companions and household guardians, weaving into the sophisticated economic networks that linked distant lands. Let's explore how these remarkable felines evolved into valuable commodities, shaping trade routes and generating new forms of wealth throughout the Viking world. Picture yourself in the great trading center of Hedeby, one of the most important commercial hubs of the Viking Age. Among the merchants hawking amber, silver, and exotic goods from distant lands, you notice specialized traders dealing exclusively with cats. These aren't ordinary barn cats but carefully bred animals with documented lineages, specific skills, and proven abilities that command prices comparable to fine weapons or precious jewelry. The presence of these cat merchants reveals how deeply felines had penetrated Viking economic systems. Archaeological evidence from major Viking trading centers shows that cats became significant economic assets in their own right. Excavations at sites like Hedeby and Birka reveal specialized facilities for housing and displaying cats for sale, complete with feeding areas and comfortable quarters designed to showcase the animal's health and temperament. These installations required substantial investment, indicating that cat trading had evolved into a sophisticated commercial enterprise. The genetic analysis of cats found at Viking sites reveals the extensive reach of these trade networks. Cats with Egyptian mitochondrial DNA have been discovered at Hedeby, demonstrating that feline commerce connected Scandinavia with North Africa through complex trading relationships. This genetic evidence suggests that Vikings didn't simply acquire cats locally, but actively sought out animals from distant regions, creating international markets for specific breeds and bloodlines. The economic value of cats in Viking society stemmed from multiple factors that created diverse market segments. Working cats valued for pest control commanded steady prices in agricultural and maritime communities, while cats with unusual markings or proven weather-predicting abilities could fetch premium rates. The most valuable cats were those associated with religious or magical practices, particularly animals believed to carry Freya's blessing or demonstrate supernatural abilities. The development of specialized breeding programs created new forms of wealth and social status within Viking communities. Families that established reputations for producing exceptional cats could command significant resources, with successful breeding operations becoming hereditary sources of prosperity. Archaeological evidence suggests that some Viking settlements developed economies partially dependent on cat breeding and trading, creating specialized communities focused on feline commerce. The integration of cats into Viking trade networks influenced the development of new commercial practices and standards. Traders developed systems for evaluating cat quality, including assessments of health, temperament, hunting ability, and spiritual significance. These evaluation methods created standardized markets where cats could be bought and sold with confidence, facilitating long-distance trade in live animals. The transportation of cats across Viking trade routes required sophisticated logistics and specialized knowledge. Merchants developed techniques for keeping cats healthy during long sea voyages, including specialized feeding programs, exercise routines, and medical care. The success of these transportation methods enabled the creation of international markets for cats, connecting breeding centers with customers located in distant regions. The economic impact of cat trading extended beyond direct sales to influence broader commercial relationships. Cats were often used as diplomatic gifts between trading partners, helping to cement business relationships and open new markets. The exchange of valuable cats not only created bonds of obligation and reciprocity, but also facilitated other forms of commerce, making felines essential tools for building and maintaining commercial networks. The role of cats in Viking monetary systems reveals their integration into sophisticated economic structures. While Vikings didn't use standardized coinage, cats served as units of value in barter systems, with specific breeds and qualities commanding known exchange rates. Trade records suggest that cats were sometimes used as collateral for loans or as payment for services, indicating their acceptance as legitimate forms of wealth. The seasonal patterns of cat trading created cyclical economic opportunities that influenced Viking commercial calendars. Spring brought an increased demand for young cats as households prepared for summer activities, while autumn saw a surge in demand for proven working cats as communities prepared for winter. These seasonal fluctuations created opportunities for merchants to maximize profits by strategically timing their purchases and sales. The strategic distribution of cat trading centers unveils the foresight and planning of Viking economic strategies. Major trading hubs like Hedeby and Birka made substantial investments in cat-related infrastructure, recognizing the economic potential of this specialized market. The concentration of cat trading in these centers created economies of scale that reduced costs and increased efficiency. The social implications of cat trading influenced Viking concepts of wealth and status. Ownership of valuable cats became a marker of prosperity and sophistication, with wealthy families competing to acquire the most exceptional animals. This competition drove innovation in breeding techniques and created incentives for developing new cat varieties with enhanced abilities. The decline of cat trading in later Viking society reflects broader changes in Norse economic systems and cultural values. As Viking society became more settled and agricultural, the demand for specialized ship cats decreased. The rise of Christianity also played a role, reducing the spiritual significance of cats in Norse culture. However, the economic structures developed for cat trading, such as barter systems and quality evaluations, influenced later Scandinavian commerce in other luxury goods. The international scope of Viking cat trading demonstrates the sophistication of Norse commercial networks. The presence of cats with diverse genetic backgrounds at Viking sites shows that merchants maintained trading relationships spanning continents, creating supply chains that connected Scandinavia with the Mediterranean, North Africa, and the British Isles. These networks required complex coordination and substantial investment, indicating the high value placed on feline commerce. The technological innovations developed for cat trading had a significant impact on broader Viking commercial practices. Techniques for transporting live animals safely across long distances were adapted for other forms of livestock trading, while methods for evaluating animal quality influenced standards for other goods. The specialized knowledge required for successful cat trading created a class of expert merchants whose skills were valuable across multiple commercial sectors. The legacy of Viking cat trading had a lasting influence on Scandinavian economic traditions for centuries after the Viking Age came to an end. Many traditional practices related to animal breeding and trading in Norway, Denmark, and Sweden can be traced back to techniques developed during the Viking period. The emphasis on quality, lineage, and specialized abilities that characterized Viking cat trading became embedded in Scandinavian approaches to livestock management. Perhaps most remarkably, the Viking cat trade represents an early example of international commerce in luxury pets. By creating markets for animals valued primarily for their companionship and symbolic significance, rather than purely practical purposes, Vikings pioneered commercial practices that prefigured modern pet industries. The sophisticated breeding programs, quality standards, and international distribution networks developed for cats established templates for luxury animal commerce that persist in modified forms today. Prepare to be amazed as we delve into the realm of individual cat personalities that captivated the imagination of Viking communities. These specific felines achieved legendary status through their extraordinary abilities, heroic deeds, or remarkable circumstances. Let's explore the stories of these celebrated cats whose names and exploits were preserved in Norse oral tradition and archaeological records. Picture yourself gathered around a flickering hearth in a Viking longhouse as the skald begins recounting tales of Mjolnir the Mauser, a legendary ship cat whose exploits became the stuff of Norse legend. This remarkable feline, named after Thor's mighty hammer, was said to have saved an entire trading expedition by detecting a hidden stowaway who planned to sabotage the mission. Archaeological evidence from high-status burials suggests that some cats achieved such renown that they were interred with honors typically reserved for human heroes. The archaeological record unveils fascinating glimpses of individual cats who held a unique and special status in Viking society. Recent excavations at Birka have uncovered the remains of a cat buried with elaborate grave goods, including silver ornaments and imported amber beads, indicating that this particular feline held extraordinary significance for its human companions. The careful positioning of the cat's remains and the quality of associated artifacts suggest this was no ordinary working animal, but a cherished individual whose life and death were commemorated with ceremony. The genetic analysis of cat remains from Viking sites has revealed evidence of selective breeding programs that produced cats with exceptional abilities. Some of these breeding lines can be traced through multiple generations, suggesting that Vikings maintained detailed records of feline lineages and deliberately bred for specific traits. The most successful breeding programs produced cats that became legendary for their hunting prowess, weather prediction abilities, or spiritual significance. The story of Freya's gift, a cat presented to the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada, illustrates how individual felines could influence political relationships. According to preserved accounts, this remarkable cat was said to possess the ability to detect poison in food and drink, making it an invaluable protector for the king. The cat's reputation for supernatural abilities enhanced Harald's prestige and created diplomatic opportunities with other rulers who sought similar protection. The archaeological evidence from the Viking fortress at Nannabakken reveals a more complex story about famous cats than previously understood. While many cat remains show proof of being processed for fur, some individuals were treated differently, with careful burial and preservation that suggests special status. These exceptional cats may have been the breeding stock for valuable bloodlines or individuals with proven abilities that made them too valuable to sacrifice. The legendary Vinland cat exemplifies the role of cats in Viking exploration, believed to have accompanied Leif Erikson's expedition to North America. While direct evidence is limited, genetic studies of North American cat populations show markers consistent with Scandinavian origins, suggesting that Viking cats may have been among the first European animals to reach the New World. The survival and reproduction of these cats in a new environment would have required exceptional adaptability and resilience. The tradition of naming cats after Norse gods and heroes reflects the high regard Vikings held for exceptional felines. Names like Odin's Eye, Thor's Claw, and Freya's Whisper appear in runic inscriptions and burial records, indicating that these cats were considered worthy of divine associations. The practice of giving cats god names was typically reserved for animals that demonstrated extraordinary abilities or played significant roles in their communities. The economic value of famous cats created markets for their offspring and established breeding dynasties that persisted for generations. Records from Viking trading centers indicate that kittens from renowned bloodlines commanded prices equivalent to those of fine weapons or precious metals. The most valuable cats were those with documented abilities, proven lineages, and reputations that extended beyond their immediate communities. The spiritual significance of individual cats is evidenced by their inclusion in religious ceremonies and ritual contexts. Some cats achieved status as sacred animals, believed to carry the blessing of Freya, or possess supernatural abilities that made them valuable for divination and protection. Archaeological evidence suggests that these sacred cats were maintained by religious specialists and played a significant role in the community's spiritual life. Detailed carvings and metalwork depicting specific cats with individual characteristics suggest that these animals were well-known figures in their communities. The gripping beast motif found on Viking artifacts often incorporates feline features that may represent specific legendary cats. The medical care provided to famous cats reveals the sophisticated understanding Vikings had of animal health and welfare. Archaeological evidence shows that some cats received medical treatment for injuries and illnesses, including surgical procedures and specialized diets. The investment in maintaining the health of valuable cats demonstrates their economic and cultural importance to Viking society. The international reputation of some Viking cats extended their influence beyond Scandinavia through trade networks and diplomatic exchanges. Cats with exceptional abilities were sometimes given as diplomatic gifts, creating relationships between distant communities and spreading Norse breeding techniques. The genetic legacy of these diplomatic cats can be traced to modern European cat populations. The decline of individual cat fame in later Viking society reflects broader cultural changes as Norse communities became more settled and Christian. The emphasis on individual animal personalities and achievements gave way to more utilitarian approaches to animal management. However, the stories and legends of famous Viking cats persisted in folk traditions and had a lasting influence on later Scandinavian culture. The archaeological challenge of identifying individual cats from skeletal remains has been addressed through advances in genetic analysis and forensic techniques. Researchers can now identify specific cats from burial contexts and trace their relationships to other individuals, creating detailed pictures of feline social networks in Viking communities. These techniques have revealed that some cats lived significantly longer than the average lifespan, suggesting the need for special care and protection. The legacy of famous Viking cats influenced the development of modern Scandinavian cat breeds. The Norwegian forest cat, in particular, shows genetic markers that can be traced back to Viking-era breeding programs. The characteristics that made cats famous in Viking society, intelligence, adaptability, and strong hunting instincts, remain valued traits in these modern breeds. The storytelling traditions surrounding famous cats created a rich oral literature that preserved their memory across generations. These stories served multiple functions: entertainment, moral instruction, and preservation of practical knowledge about cat behavior and care. The integration of cat stories into broader Norse narrative traditions demonstrates their cultural significance. Perhaps most remarkably, the phenomenon of famous Viking cats represents an early example of an individual animal celebrity that prefigures modern pet culture. The detailed attention paid to specific cats, their personalities, abilities, and life stories shows that Vikings developed emotional attachments to animals that went far beyond their practical utility. The preservation of these individual stories in archaeological and literary records demonstrates that the human-animal bond was as crucial to Vikings as it is to modern pet owners. The study of famous Viking cats reveals the sophisticated relationship between humans and animals in Norse society. Rather than viewing cats merely as tools or commodities, Vikings recognized and celebrated individual personalities, abilities, and achievements. This recognition established a cultural framework that valued animal welfare, encouraged selective breeding for desirable traits, and fostered traditions of animal commemoration that profoundly influenced Scandinavian culture for centuries. You're now embarking on a remarkable genetic journey that connects the cats of Viking longships to the magnificent felines that grace modern Scandinavian homes today. Let's trace the evolutionary pathways and breeding traditions that preserved the essence of Viking cats through centuries of change, creating the distinctive breeds we recognize and cherish in contemporary times. Picture yourself examining a majestic Norwegian forest cat, its thick double coat glistening in the Nordic sunlight, and realize you're looking at a living descendant of the cats that once prowled Viking ships and settlements. The genetic analysis of modern Scandinavian cat breeds reveals direct lineages that can be traced back to Viking-era populations, demonstrating remarkable continuity across more than 1,000 years of breeding. These connections aren't merely coincidental, but represent the deliberate preservation of traits that made Viking cats exceptional companions and workers. The Norwegian forest cat, known locally as the skogcat, represents the most direct link to Viking feline heritage. Archaeological evidence suggests that Vikings specifically bred the ancestors of these cats for their ability to survive harsh Nordic conditions while maintaining their hunting prowess and companionship qualities. The breed's distinctive features, the water-resistant double coat, robust build, and exceptional climbing ability, reflect adaptations that were crucial for survival in Viking settlements and aboard ships, a testament to the resilience of these felines. The genetic studies of Norwegian forest cats reveal fascinating insights into Viking breeding practices and their long-term consequences. DNA analysis shows that these cats possess genetic markers from multiple ancient populations, including Egyptian cats that arrived via Viking trade networks and indigenous Scandinavian wildcats that were domesticated during the Viking Age. This genetic diversity reflects the sophisticated breeding programs that Vikings developed to create cats suited for specific environments and purposes. The preservation of Viking cat characteristics in modern breeds wasn't accidental, but rather the result of deliberate efforts by Scandinavian communities to maintain valuable traits. Rural Norwegian and Swedish families continued breeding practices established during the Viking Age, selecting cats that could survive harsh winters, hunt effectively, and serve as loyal companions. These traditional breeding methods preserved not only physical characteristics but also behavioral traits that made Viking cats exceptional. The influence of Viking cats extends beyond Norway to other Scandinavian breeds that show clear genetic connections to Viking-era populations. The Swedish farm cat and Danish longhair both carry genetic markers that link them to cats found at Viking archaeological sites. These breeds developed in different regions of Scandinavia, but share common ancestry with the cats that accompanied Viking traders and settlers across northern Europe. The archaeological evidence supporting the connection between Viking cats and modern breeds comes from multiple sources that paint a comprehensive picture. Skeletal remains from Viking sites reveal cats with bone structures and proportions that closely match those of modern Norwegian forest cats. The consistency of these physical characteristics across different Viking settlements suggests that breeding for specific traits was a widespread and systematic practice. The role of isolation in preserving Viking cat genetics cannot be understated in understanding how these ancient lineages survived. Many Scandinavian communities remained relatively isolated for centuries after the Viking Age, creating genetic bottlenecks that preserved specific cat populations. This isolation prevented the dilution of Viking cat genetics through crossbreeding with other populations, maintaining the distinctive characteristics that define modern Scandinavian breeds. The documentation of cat breeding in medieval Scandinavian sources provides additional evidence for the continuity between Viking and modern cats. Church records and legal documents from the medieval period reference specific cat breeds and breeding practices that derive from Viking traditions. These sources describe cats with characteristics identical to modern Norwegian forest cats, indicating unbroken breeding lines. The economic importance of maintaining Viking cat bloodlines influenced their preservation through changing historical circumstances. Even as Scandinavian society transformed from Viking raiding and trading to medieval agriculture and later industrialization, the practical value of cats with proven hunting abilities and hardy constitutions ensured their continued breeding. Farmers and rural communities recognized that these cats represented valuable genetic resources worth preserving. The modern recognition of Norwegian forest cats as a distinct breed in the 20th century brought scientific attention to their Viking heritage. Breed registries and genetic studies confirmed what Norwegian folklore had long maintained. These cats were direct descendants of the felines that accompanied Vikings on their expeditions. This recognition led to systematic efforts to preserve and promote the breed while maintaining its historical characteristics. The behavioral traits that made Viking cats exceptional companions have been preserved in modern Scandinavian breeds through careful selection. Norwegian forest cats exhibit the same intelligence, adaptability, and loyalty that made their ancestors highly valued by Viking communities. These cats retain the ability to form strong bonds with humans while maintaining their independence and hunting instincts. The international spread of Norwegian forest cats and other Scandinavian breeds has carried Viking cat genetics worldwide. Breeding programs in North America, Europe, and other regions now maintain populations of cats with direct genetic links to the felines of the Viking era. This global distribution ensures the preservation of these ancient bloodlines while introducing Viking cat characteristics to new environments. The challenges facing the modern preservation of Viking cat genetics include maintaining genetic diversity while preserving the historical characteristics of these cats. Breeding programs must strike a balance between maintaining authentic Viking traits and preventing inbreeding and genetic bottlenecks. Modern genetic techniques enable breeders to make informed decisions about maintaining healthy populations while preserving historical lineages. The cultural significance of Viking cat breeds extends beyond their genetic heritage to their role as living symbols of Scandinavian history and culture. Norwegian forest cats serve as ambassadors for Viking culture, connecting modern people with their historical heritage through the tangible presence of these remarkable animals. Their popularity in contemporary pet culture demonstrates the enduring appeal of the human-animal bonds that characterized Viking society. The scientific study of Viking cat genetics has contributed to a broader understanding of animal domestication and breed development. The preservation of distinct genetic lineages over such extended periods provides valuable insights into how human selection pressures shape animal evolution. The Viking cat story illustrates how cultural practices can impact genetic outcomes over centuries. The future of Viking cat breeds depends on continued recognition of their historical importance and genetic value. Conservation efforts must strike a balance between preserving authentic characteristics and meeting the practical needs of modern breeding programs. The success of these efforts will determine whether future generations can continue to experience the living legacy of Viking cats, underscoring the responsibility we all share in preserving this unique genetic heritage. Perhaps most remarkably, the survival of Viking cat genetics in modern breeds represents one of the most tangible connections we have to the daily life of the Vikings. While Viking ships have rotted away and their settlements lie buried, their cats live on in the purring companions that share our homes today. These living descendants carry within their genes the story of Viking exploration, trade, and settlement, making every Norwegian forest cat a four-legged piece of history. The legacy of Viking cats in modern Scandinavian breeds demonstrates the profound impact that human-animal relationships can have across centuries. The careful preservation of these genetic lineages reflects not only the practical value Vikings placed on their cats, but also the emotional bonds that motivated people to maintain these bloodlines through changing times. In our modern Norwegian forest cats, we see not just beautiful animals but living testaments to the enduring power of the human-feline bond that began on Viking longships over 1,000 years ago. As you embark on this journey into the captivating realm of archaeological discovery, you'll find that even the most seemingly insignificant fragments of bone and ancient refuse pits can unveil profound insights into the lives and deaths of Viking cats. Let's delve into the physical evidence that has endured centuries buried in Scandinavian soil, offering tangible proof of the extraordinary bond between Vikings and their feline companions. Imagine yourself standing alongside archaeologists as they meticulously unearth a Viking settlement, carefully removing centuries of dirt from delicate cat bones that narrate tales of life, death, and human-animal relationships in ways that surpass the capabilities of any written record. The archaeological evidence for Viking cats, gathered from numerous sites across Scandinavia and Viking territories, provides a comprehensive picture of feline life during the Viking Age, one that transcends mere mythology and folklore. The most significant archaeological discoveries come from Danish sites, where researchers have analyzed cat remains spanning nearly 2,000 years of history. The University of Copenhagen's groundbreaking study examined hundreds of feline bones from the Iron Age, Viking, and medieval periods, revealing that cats grew approximately 16% larger between the Viking Age and modern times. This size increase suggests that Viking cats had access to abundant food sources and lived in conditions that allowed them to reach their full genetic potential. The bone analysis reveals fascinating details about Viking cat health and lifestyle, illuminating their daily experiences. Many Viking-era cat skeletons show evidence of hard living, healed fractures from falls or fights, where patterns on teeth from gnawing tough materials, and joint changes consistent with active outdoor lives. However, these same bones also show evidence of care, with some cats living to advanced ages that would have been impossible without human protection and feeding. The discovery of cat remains in Viking ship burials provides direct evidence of their maritime importance. Archaeological excavations of Viking vessels have uncovered cat bones positioned near food storage areas and crew quarters, confirming their role as shipboard pest controllers. The careful placement of these remains suggests that cats were considered integral crew members worthy of inclusion in burial rituals. The most disturbing archaeological evidence comes from sites like the Viking fortress at Nonnebakken in Odense, where 68 cat skeletons were found in a single well. Analysis of these remains shows clear evidence of deliberate killing, broken necks and cut marks consistent with skinning for fur. This discovery provides concrete proof that Vikings harvested cats for their pelts, though the scale and systematic nature of this practice remains debated among scholars. The genetic analysis of ancient cat DNA from archaeological sites has revolutionized our understanding of the origins and breeding practices of Viking cats. DNA extracted from Viking-era cat bones reveals genetic markers that link these animals to Egyptian cats, which were introduced through Mediterranean trade networks. This genetic evidence confirms that Viking cats were not indigenous Scandinavian animals, but rather descendants of cats that traversed extensive trade routes. This revelation significantly enhances our understanding of Viking culture. Archaeological evidence from Viking trading centers, such as Hedeby and Birka, reveals the commercial importance of cats in Norse society. Excavations at these sites have uncovered specialized facilities that may have been used for cat breeding and trading, including enclosed areas with high concentrations of cat remains and evidence of systematic feeding. The presence of cats from different genetic lineages at these sites suggests active importation and breeding programs. The preservation conditions at different archaeological sites have created varying qualities of evidence about Viking cats. Waterlogged sites in Denmark and Sweden have preserved not only bones but also soft tissues and fur, providing unprecedented insights into the appearance and health of cats. These exceptionally well-preserved remains indicate that Viking cats had thick, dense coats similar to those of modern Norwegian forest cats. The archaeological context of cat burials reveals the spiritual significance these animals held in Viking society. Cats found buried with grave goods, including jewelry, tools, and food offerings, demonstrate that some felines achieved status equivalent to human family members. The careful positioning of cat remains, along with the quality of associated artifacts, suggests elaborate burial ceremonies that honored these animals' contributions to their communities. The isotope analysis of Viking cat bones provides insights into their diet and lifestyle that complement other archaeological evidence. Chemical analysis of bone composition reveals that Viking cats had access to marine proteins, confirming their presence on ships and coastal settlements. The isotope signatures also show seasonal variations in diet, suggesting that cats adapted their hunting patterns to available prey throughout the year. The archaeological evidence for cat breeding programs comes from sites where multiple generations of cats are represented in the remains. Genetic analysis of these multi-generational populations shows deliberate selection for specific traits, including size, coat characteristics, and hunting ability. The consistency of these traits across different sites suggests that Viking breeding practices were sophisticated and widespread. The discovery of cat remains in Viking Age refuse pits provides insights into the everyday treatment of these animals. While some cats received elaborate burials, others were disposed of in common waste areas, suggesting a range of relationships between Vikings and their cats. The condition of bones in refuse contexts often shows evidence of processing for fur or other materials. The archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and other colonies reveals the significant role cats played in Norse expansion. Cat remains found at these distant settlements show genetic links to Scandinavian populations, confirming that Vikings deliberately transported cats to new territories. The survival and reproduction of these cats in harsh environments testify to their hardiness and the care provided by their human companions. The comparative analysis of cat remains from different social contexts within Viking settlements reveals class distinctions in cat ownership. High-status households exhibit evidence of larger, healthier cats with access to better nutrition, whereas lower-status areas contain remains of smaller cats with more signs of harsh living conditions. These differences suggest that cat quality and care reflected the social status of their owners. The archaeological evidence for cat diseases and veterinary care in Viking society comes from pathological changes visible in ancient bones. Some cat skeletons show evidence of healed injuries that would have required human intervention to survive. The presence of cats with disabilities or chronic conditions that lived to advanced ages suggests that Vikings provided medical care for valued animals. The seasonal patterns visible in archaeological deposits reveal the timing of cat births, deaths, and processing activities. The concentration of young cats remaining in specific layers suggests that Vikings timed breeding programs to produce kittens during optimal seasons. The seasonal variation in adult cat deaths may reflect the hazards of maritime life or the timing of fur harvesting. The archaeological evidence from Viking Age urban centers shows the adaptation of cats to increasingly dense human settlements. Cat remains from these contexts show different pathologies and diet signatures compared to rural sites, reflecting the challenges and opportunities of city life. The higher concentration of cat remains in urban areas suggests that cities provided favorable environments for feline populations. Perhaps most remarkably, the archaeological record demonstrates the continuity of human-cat relationships from the Viking Age to the present. The care, burial practices, and emotional investment evident in Viking cat remains mirror modern pet-keeping behaviors. The archaeological evidence suggests that the bond between Vikings and their cats was as strong and complex as the relationships we maintain with cats today. The ongoing archaeological investigation of Viking sites continues to reveal new evidence about cats and their role in Norse society. Recent discoveries utilizing advanced techniques, such as ground-penetrating radar and environmental DNA analysis, promise to uncover additional sites and provide even more detailed insights into Viking cat life. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of understanding how these remarkable animals shaped and were shaped by Viking culture. Embark on a journey to explore the profound cultural significance of cats in Viking art and literature. Discover how these remarkable animals were immortalized in the creative expressions of Norse society, from intricate carvings to captivating stories. Uncover the deep-rooted role cats played in the Viking imagination and daily life. Picture yourself examining the intricate wood carvings on the famous Oseberg ship burial, where cats appear among the decorative motifs that adorned one of the most prestigious Viking vessels ever discovered. The presence of cats in such high-status artistic contexts demonstrates that these animals held symbolic importance that extended far beyond their practical roles as mousers and companions. The artistic representations of cats in Viking culture offer a glimpse into how these animals were perceived, valued, and incorporated into the Norse worldview. The archaeological evidence for Viking cat art comes from multiple sources that span the entire Viking Age, revealing consistent themes and evolving artistic traditions. The amber figurine discovered at Birka, measuring approximately 3 centimeters in length with carefully drilled holes, represents one of the most intriguing examples of Viking cat art. This small sculpture, likely a child's toy, was found in contexts associated with child burials, suggesting that cats held special significance in Viking concepts of childhood and protection. The gripping beast motif, a standard feature on Viking Age swords, often depicts cats as the central animal. This motif symbolizes strength, ferocity, and protection, qualities that were highly valued in Viking warrior culture. For instance, a 9th century sword hilt found in Scotland features this motif, with a cat as the gripping beast. This suggests that cats were considered suitable symbols for the ferocity and stealth required in battle. The choice to feature cats on weapons indicates that the Vikings associated these animals with qualities they valued in battle, such as stealth, quick reflexes, and deadly precision. The artistic representations of cats in Norse mythology center primarily around their connection to the goddess Freya, whose cat-drawn chariot appears in various forms throughout Viking Age art. The depiction of Freya's cats, Beigel and Trygil, in artistic contexts, reveals how Vikings conceptualized the relationship between divine power and feline grace. These mythological cats were portrayed not as ordinary domestic animals, but as supernatural beings capable of pulling a goddess across the heavens. The scholarly debate surrounding the origins of Freya's cat imagery reflects broader questions about the development of Norse mythology and its artistic expression. Some researchers argue that the association between Freya and cats developed during the Viking Age as a reflection of the practical importance of cats in Norse society. Others suggest that this imagery may have been influenced by contact with other cultures where cat goddesses were prominent, such as ancient Egypt. This debate adds depth to our understanding of the cultural influences on Viking art and mythology. The textile evidence for cat imagery in Viking culture comes from fragments of cloth and tapestries that have survived in exceptional preservation conditions. While complete textiles are rare, the fragments that remain show sophisticated weaving techniques used to create cat motifs in clothing and household items. The presence of cat imagery in textiles suggests that these animals were considered appropriate decorative subjects for everyday objects. The runic inscriptions that mention cats offer further evidence of their cultural significance in Viking society. While cats appear less frequently in runic texts than other animals, their presence in these inscriptions indicates that they were considered worthy of written commemoration. The contexts in which cats appear in runic inscriptions often relate to protection, fertility, and household prosperity. The literary evidence for cats in Norse culture primarily comes from later medieval sources, which may reflect Viking Age traditions. The sagas and Eddic poetry that mention cats often portray them in connection with magic, sorcery, and supernatural abilities. However, recent scholarship suggests that these negative associations may reflect later Christian influences rather than authentic Viking beliefs about cats. The archaeological context of artistic cat representations reveals patterns in their distribution and significance across Viking society. High-status burials and settlements exhibit a higher concentration of cat-related art objects, indicating that the ability to commission or own such items was a reflection of social status. The quality and materials used in cat figurines and decorations also varied according to the wealth and position of their owners. The regional variations in Viking cat art reflect different cultural influences and local traditions across the Norse world. Scandinavian sites show different artistic styles and motifs compared to Viking settlements in Britain, Ireland, and other territories. These variations suggest that cat imagery adapted to local artistic traditions while maintaining core symbolic meanings. Witness the evolution of cat imagery throughout the Viking Age, a testament to the changing attitudes and relationships between humans and cats. Early Viking Age art presents cats in a more naturalistic light, while later periods feature increasingly stylized and symbolic representations. This evolution reflects the increasing integration of cats into Norse domestic life and spiritual beliefs, offering a fascinating glimpse into the historical context. Marvel at the influence of trade and cultural exchange on Viking cat art, evident in the incorporation of foreign artistic elements and motifs. The presence of Egyptian-style cat imagery in some Viking contexts suggests that artistic ideas traveled along the same trade routes that brought actual cats to Scandinavia. This cultural exchange enriched Viking artistic traditions while maintaining distinctly Norse characteristics, highlighting the global connections of the Viking world. The preservation challenges facing Viking cat art have limited our understanding of the full scope of these cultural representations. Organic materials such as wood, leather, and textiles rarely survive in archaeological contexts, meaning that much of the artistic evidence for cats has been lost. The surviving examples likely represent only a fraction of the original artistic production. The modern interpretation of Viking cat art has been influenced by contemporary attitudes toward cats and changing scholarly perspectives. Early researchers often dismissed cat imagery as marginal or unimportant, while recent scholarship has recognized the significance of these representations for understanding Viking culture. This shift in interpretation reflects broader changes in how we understand the role of animals in historical societies. The symbolic meanings associated with cats in Viking art encompass themes of protection, fertility, magic, and domestic prosperity. The consistent appearance of these themes across different artistic media suggests that cats held deep cultural significance that transcended their practical roles. The symbolic associations of cats in Viking art continue to influence modern interpretations of Norse culture and mythology. The technical aspects of creating cat imagery in Viking art reveal sophisticated artistic skills and cultural knowledge. The carvers, metalworkers, and textile artists who created representations of cats possess detailed knowledge of feline anatomy and behavior. The accuracy and artistry of these representations demonstrate that cats were carefully observed and appreciated subjects by Viking artists. The social functions of cat art in Viking society extended beyond mere decoration to include religious, protective, and status signaling purposes. Cat imagery on personal items, such as jewelry and weapons, may have served as protective talismans or symbols of divine favor. The presence of cat art in domestic contexts suggests that these images were believed to bring good fortune to households. The legacy of Viking cat art continues to influence modern Scandinavian artistic traditions and cultural identity. Contemporary Norwegian and Danish artists often draw inspiration from Viking Age cat imagery, creating modern interpretations that connect present-day culture with historical traditions. The enduring appeal of these ancient artistic representations demonstrates the lasting impact of the human-cat bond in Norse culture. Perhaps most significantly, The artistic representations of cats in Viking culture provide evidence for the emotional and spiritual relationships that existed between Vikings and their feline companions. The care and attention devoted to creating cat imagery suggest that these animals were not merely utilitarian but held places of honor in Viking hearts and minds. The artistic legacy of Viking cats serves as a testament to the enduring power of the human-animal bond that began over 1,000 years ago on the windswept shores of Scandinavia. You're now exploring the remarkable continuity of the human-cat relationship that began on Viking longships over 1,000 years ago and continues to shape our lives today. Let's examine how the bonds forged between Norse seafarers and their feline companions established patterns of companionship, care, and cultural significance that persist in modern society. Imagine yourself tracing an unbroken thread of connection that stretches from a Viking warrior gently stroking his ship's cat during a storm in the North Sea to a modern Scandinavian family welcoming a Norwegian forest cat into their home. This continuity represents one of the most enduring legacies of Viking culture, demonstrating how the practical necessities of maritime life evolved into deep emotional bonds that transcended their original utilitarian purposes. The archaeological evidence for the evolution of human-cat relationships during the Viking Age reveals a gradual but significant shift from purely functional associations to genuine companionship. Early Viking Age sites primarily feature cats in contexts related to pest control and economic utility, but later periods demonstrate an increasing presence of cats as valued family members. This transformation mirrors the development of modern pet-keeping practices, suggesting that Vikings were among the first Europeans to develop truly affectionate relationships with cats. The burial practices surrounding Viking cats provide compelling evidence for the emotional bonds that developed between humans and their feline companions. The progression from occasional cat burials in high-status graves to more frequent interments across social classes indicates that cats gradually became integrated into Viking concepts of family and the afterlife. The careful positioning of cat remains, along with the inclusion of grave goods intended explicitly for cats, demonstrates levels of care and emotional investment that parallel modern pet burial practices. The genetic legacy of Viking cats in modern Scandinavian breeds serves as a living testament to the success of these ancient human-animal partnerships. The Norwegian forest cat, with its distinctive characteristics shaped by centuries of selective breeding and natural adaptation, embodies the practical and aesthetic preferences of its Viking ancestors. Modern cat enthusiasts who choose these breeds are continuing the Viking tradition of valuing cats for both their functional abilities and their companionship qualities. The cultural transmission of cat-related beliefs and practices from Viking times to the present demonstrates the deep integration of cats into Scandinavian identity. Modern Scandinavian folklore continues to reflect many of the same themes that appeared in Viking Age beliefs about cats, including their protective powers, connection to fertility and domestic prosperity, and their role as bridges between the human and supernatural worlds. The persistence of these beliefs suggests that the Viking understanding of cats as more than mere animals has become a fundamental aspect of Nordic cultural identity. The modern practice of giving cats as wedding gifts in Scandinavian countries directly echoes the Viking tradition of presenting kittens to brides. This custom, which continues in various forms today, illustrates how practical Viking innovations became ingrained in cultural traditions that endure across centuries. The belief that cats bring good fortune to marriages reflects the same understanding of feline protective powers that motivated Vikings to carry cats on their dangerous sea voyages. The scholarly debate about the authenticity of Viking cat beliefs versus later Christian influences highlights the complexity of tracing cultural continuity across centuries. Recent research suggests that many negative associations between cats and witchcraft may have been imposed on Norse culture by later Christian writers, rather than reflecting authentic Viking beliefs. This reinterpretation supports the idea that Vikings maintained predominantly positive relationships with cats, establishing patterns of companionship that were later obscured by medieval religious prejudices. The economic aspects of the human-cat relationship established during the Viking Age continue to influence modern cat breeding and ownership practices. The Viking recognition of cats as valuable commodities worthy of international trade established precedents for the modern cat fancy, where specific breeds command high prices and careful breeding programs preserve desired characteristics. The economic value placed on cats by Vikings laid the groundwork for contemporary attitudes toward purebred cats and specialized breeding practices. The practical benefits that motivated Vikings to maintain cats, pest control, weather prediction, and companionship during long voyages, remain relevant in modern contexts. Contemporary ship owners, farmers, and homeowners continue to value cats for many of the same reasons that made them indispensable to Viking crews. The enduring utility of cats in these roles demonstrates that the Viking assessment of feline capabilities was both accurate and prescient. The spiritual and emotional dimensions of the human-cat bond that developed during the Viking Age find expression in modern pet-keeping practices and beliefs. The Viking understanding of cats as protective spirits and sources of comfort during difficult times resonates with contemporary attitudes toward cats as emotional support animals and therapeutic companions. The psychological benefits that Vikings derived from their relationships with cats parallel the well-documented mental health benefits of modern pet ownership. The artistic and cultural representations of cats that emerged during the Viking Age continue to influence modern Scandinavian art, literature, and popular culture. Contemporary artists and writers draw inspiration from Viking cat imagery and mythology, creating works that connect modern audiences with their historical heritage. The enduring appeal of these ancient artistic traditions demonstrates the lasting impact of Viking cultural innovations. The global spread of cats, which began with Viking maritime activities, established patterns of human-cat relationships that now span the entire world. The cats that Vikings carried to Iceland, Greenland, and other distant territories became the ancestors of cat populations that continue to thrive in these locations. The success of these introductions demonstrates the enduring legacy of the human-cat bond that Vikings pioneered. The modern understanding of cat behavior and psychology has validated many of the observations and beliefs that Vikings developed through their close relationships with cats. Scientific research has confirmed that cats do indeed possess many of the abilities that Vikings attributed to them, including weather sensitivity, protective instincts, and emotional intelligence. This validation underscores the respect we should have for the Viking understanding of cats, which was based on careful observation and genuine appreciation for feline capabilities. The therapeutic and emotional support roles that cats play in modern society echo the comfort and companionship that these animals provided to Viking crews during long, dangerous voyages. The presence of cats on Viking ships served not only practical purposes but also psychological ones, providing crew members with sources of comfort and emotional stability during stressful situations. Modern therapy cat programs and emotional support animal practices continue this tradition of recognizing cats' capacity to provide psychological benefits to humans. The conservation efforts surrounding breeds like the Norwegian forest cat reflect a modern commitment to preserving the genetic and cultural legacy of Viking cats. Breed preservation programs work to maintain the characteristics that made these cats valuable to their Viking ancestors while adapting them to contemporary living conditions. These efforts represent a form of cultural conservation that honors the historical relationship between Vikings and their feline companions. The integration of cats into modern family structures mirrors the gradual acceptance of cats as family members that began during the Viking Age. The progression from working animals to beloved pets that occurred in Viking society established patterns of human-cat relationships that continue to evolve in contemporary contexts. Modern cat owners who treat their pets as family members are following traditions that can be traced back to Viking households. The scientific study of ancient cat DNA and archaeological remains has provided new insights into the depth and complexity of Viking cat relationships. These research efforts demonstrate that modern scientific methods can illuminate historical relationships and validate traditional knowledge about human-animal bonds. The genetic evidence for deliberate cat breeding and care by Vikings confirms that these relationships were sophisticated and intentional rather than merely opportunistic. Perhaps most significantly, The enduring human-cat bond that began on Viking ships represents a testament to the capacity for cross-species relationships to transcend their original practical purposes and develop into genuine partnerships based on mutual benefit and affection. The cats that once prowled the decks of Viking longships, keeping watch for mice and providing comfort to homesick sailors, established a template for human-animal relationships that continue to enrich our lives today. In every purr of contentment from a modern house cat, we hear echoes of the first tentative bonds formed between Viking sailors and their feline companions on the storm-tossed seas of the North Atlantic. You're now reaching the end of our journey through the remarkable relationship between Vikings and their feline companions. This story spans over a millennium and continues to influence our understanding of human-animal bonds today. Let's bring together all the threads we've explored and reflect on the enduring legacy of these extraordinary partnerships that began on the windswept decks of Viking longships. Picture yourself standing on the shore of a modern Norwegian fjord, watching a contemporary fishing vessel return to port with its crew and perhaps a ship's cat keeping watch from the bow. At that moment, you're witnessing the continuation of a tradition that stretches back over 1,000 years to when Viking warriors first recognized that cats could be more than mere mousers. They could be companions, protectors, and bridges between the human and divine worlds. The archaeological evidence we've examined throughout our exploration reveals that the relationship between the Vikings and cats was far more complex and meaningful than a simple case of pest control. The progression from occasional cat remains in early Viking Age sites to the elaborate burials and artistic representations of later periods demonstrates an evolution in how these animals were perceived and valued. The cats that began as practical necessities aboard Viking ships gradually became integrated into Norse society as beloved family members, spiritual protectors, and symbols of prosperity. The genetic legacy of Viking cats endures in modern Scandinavian breeds, particularly the Norwegian forest cat, which serves as a living testament to the selective breeding practices and care that Vikings devoted to their feline companions. These magnificent animals, with their thick coats, adapted to harsh Nordic winters, and their independent yet affectionate temperaments, embody the practical wisdom and emotional intelligence that characterized Viking relationships with cats. Modern cat enthusiasts who choose these breeds are continuing a tradition of appreciation for feline qualities that date back over a millennium. The cultural and spiritual dimensions of the Viking cat relationship reveal a sophisticated understanding of animal psychology and behavior that predates modern scientific knowledge by centuries. The Vikings' recognition of cats as weather predictors, their association with the goddess Freya, and their role in marriage customs demonstrate that these ancient seafarers understood cats possessed abilities and significance that transcended their utilitarian functions. The persistence of many of these beliefs in modern Scandinavian folklore suggests that Viking insights into feline nature were both accurate and enduring. The scholarly debate surrounding the interpretation of Viking cat beliefs highlights the importance of distinguishing between authentic Norse traditions and later Christian influences that may have distorted our understanding of these relationships. Recent archaeological research suggests that Vikings maintained predominantly positive relationships with cats, viewing them as beneficial rather than threatening or supernatural in negative ways. This reinterpretation supports the idea that the human-cat bond we recognize today has deep historical roots in Viking culture. The economic aspects of Viking cat relationships establish precedents for modern attitudes toward cat breeding, ownership, and trade. The recognition of cats as valuable commodities worthy of international commerce, the development of specialized breeding programs, and the use of cats as diplomatic gifts all demonstrate that Vikings understood the economic potential of human-cat partnerships. These practices laid the groundwork for contemporary cat fancy and the global trade in purebred animals. The practical benefits that motivated the Vikings to maintain cats, such as pest control, companionship during long voyages, and protection against various threats, remain relevant in modern contexts. Contemporary ship owners, farmers, and pet owners continue to value cats for many of the same reasons that made them indispensable to Viking crews. The enduring utility of cats in these roles validates the Viking assessment of feline capabilities and demonstrates the timeless nature of human-cat partnerships. The artistic and literary representations of cats in Viking culture established traditions of feline imagery that continue to influence Scandinavian art and popular culture. From the amber figurines of Birka to the gripping beast motifs on sword hilts, Viking artists recognized cats as worthy subjects for their most sophisticated creative expressions. Modern artists and writers who draw inspiration from these ancient traditions are participating in a cultural conversation that began over 1,000 years ago. The global spread of cats, which began with Viking maritime activities, represents one of the most successful examples of human-mediated animal dispersal in history. The cats that Vikings carried to Iceland, Greenland, and other distant territories became the ancestors of thriving populations that continue to enrich these communities today. The success of these introductions demonstrates the effectiveness of the human-cat partnership that Vikings pioneered and refined. The therapeutic and emotional support roles that cats play in modern society echo the comfort and psychological benefits that these animals provided to Viking crews during dangerous voyages. The presence of cats on Viking ships served not only practical purposes but also emotional ones, providing crew members with sources of comfort, stress relief, and companionship during extended periods away from home. Modern therapy cat programs and emotional support animal practices continue this tradition of recognizing cats' capacity to provide psychological benefits to humans. The conservation efforts surrounding breeds like the Norwegian forest cat reflect a modern commitment to preserving the genetic and cultural heritage of Viking cats. Breed preservation programs work to maintain the characteristics that made these cats valuable to their Viking ancestors while adapting them to contemporary living conditions. These efforts represent a form of cultural conservation that honors the historical relationship between Vikings and their feline companions. The integration of cats into modern family structures mirrors the gradual acceptance of cats as family members that began during the Viking Age. The progression from working animals to beloved pets that occurred in Viking society established patterns of human-cat relationships that continue to evolve in contemporary contexts. Modern cat owners who treat their pets as family members are following traditions that can be traced directly back to Viking households. The scientific validation of many Viking observations about cat behavior demonstrates that these ancient seafarers possessed a sophisticated understanding of animal psychology. Modern research has confirmed that cats do indeed possess many of the abilities that Vikings attributed to them, including weather sensitivity, protective instincts, and emotional intelligence. This validation suggests that Viking knowledge of cats was based on careful observation and genuine appreciation for feline capabilities rather than mere superstition. Perhaps most significantly, the enduring human-cat bond that began on Viking ships represents a testament to the capacity for relationships between different species to transcend their original practical purposes and develop into genuine partnerships based on mutual benefit, respect, and affection. The cats that once prowled the decks of Viking longships, keeping watch for mice and providing comfort to homesick sailors, established a template for human-animal relationships that continue to enrich our lives today. As you drift off to sleep tonight, consider the remarkable journey we've taken together through the world of Viking cats. From the practical necessities that first brought cats aboard Norse vessels to the deep emotional bonds that developed between warriors and their feline companions, we've seen how a relationship born of necessity evolved into something far more profound. In every purr of contentment from a modern house cat, in every Norwegian forest cat's independent yet affectionate gaze, and every moment of comfort we derive from our feline friends, we hear echoes of those first tentative bonds formed between Viking sailors and their cats on the storm-tossed seas of the North Atlantic over 1,000 years ago. The story of Vikings and their cats reminds us that the relationships we form with animals can transcend time, culture, and circumstance, creating bonds that enrich both human and animal lives in ways that continue to surprise and delight us. Sweet dreams, and may your feline companions bring you the same comfort, protection, and joy that cats brought to their Viking partners so many centuries ago.